docket, which is located at source/legal/rulemaking-docket, and are on file at the BMV Central Office located at Indiana Government Center North, 100 North Senate Avenue, room N404, Indianapolis, Indiana, as well as the Legislative Services Agency, 1 North Capitol, Suite 325, Indianapolis, Indiana, and all are open for public inspection. The regulatory analysis, notice of first public comment period, and a notice of this public hearing were first published in the Indiana Register on June 18, 2025. A summary of today's public hearing will be provided to stakeholders for their consideration. As I indicated, there is a sign-up sheet in the front of the room to make public comments, and individuals will be called forward to comment on the proposed rule. In addition, if you want to submit written comments to accompany any verbal comments, you may do so by emailing bmvlegal@bmv.in.gov by midnight tonight, July 22nd, 2025. So the hearing is now open for public comments. I'll grab the sign-in sheet. Thank you. First, Emma Bosicki. I apologize in advance if I actually not a good pronunciation. And I don't know if the mic for the hearing is recording on here, so I don't know if that amplifies or not.
Certainly speak in here.
We can hear it.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if that was hooked up. I just wanted to make sure that you speak loud enough for everyone to hear you.
Oh, well, it's easy. Okay. I'm Emma Bosky. As a gender diverse Hoosier and executive director of Gender Nexus, I oppose the proposed rule barring gender diverse Hoosiers from obtaining or an F on birth certificates is consistently faulty, and its errors would become impossible to correct. Medical science determines sex based upon the totality of multiple factors, including external body structures, internal reproductive organs, chromosomes, genes, enzymes, hormones, sensitivity of the cell's hormonal receptors, gender identity, and brain structure. Rarely do individuals placing an M or F on a birth certificate conduct this full review of the totality of essential factors. Instead, basing their conclusions on a momentary look at external structures, which can often be ambiguous, this process leads to mistakes, resulting in lifelong, extensive, and substantive physical and mental harm. When an individual's understanding of their gender identity differs from the sex assigned by some stranger, it's an alarm bell indicating a failure in the assignation process. If the state is going to impose an efficient assignation process, damaging human beings, it should also provide a remedy for those process failures. The current rules provide that essential remedy, while the proposed rule prolongs the damage for a lifetime. Further, the proposed rule is far less consistent with case law since it can result in designations not reflecting the licensee's sex. Additionally, the BMV and its author were gender diverse. They know an ID card not reflecting a person's actual sex facilitates discrimination in housing, jobs, education, and hospitality settings. They know transgender individuals are 4 times more likely to be victims of violence. They know that outing another person sets them up for violence. And they have written that this rule change will significantly harm thousands of Hoosiers. Finally, the BMV claims that it must uphold deeply rooted legal traditions. Well, there have been a whole lot of deeply rooted legal traditions. Until 1920, women weren't considered competent to vote. Until 74, they couldn't get credit cards or take out loans without male co-signers. For centuries, votes of color weren't considered or treated as fully human. Any tradition, including the one referenced by the BMV, that diminishes or harms another human being should cease. This rule should not be approved.
Next we have Medino.
We'll blame the handwriting on that one. morning. My name is Nadine McSpadden, and I serve as the Director of Advocacy and General Counsel for IYG, an organization that has supported LGBTQ+ young people in Indiana for over 35 years. I am here today to speak in strong opposition to the proposed rule that would strip transgender, gender diverse, and intersex Hoosiers of the ability to amend the gender marker on their state-issued ID. Let's be clear, this is not about solving a problem, it's about creating one. It's about whether the state of Indiana is willing to knowingly place its own residents in harm's way. IDs that don't reflect how someone lives, how they show up in the world, create daily risks of real harm. For the young people we work with at IYG, an incongruent ID can mean being assaulted, harassed by a store clerk, denied care by a doctor, or turned away from housing. And these are not hypotheticals. Nationally, nearly 1 in 4 transgender people report being assaulted, verbally harassed, or denied service when presenting an ID that doesn't match their gender. And let's not pretend that removing this option solves a problem. Transgender Hoosiers have had access to gender marker amendments for decades, and there is no evidence that it has ever harmed anyone. For those seeking to amend their ID, this process is already burdensome. It often requires a physician's attestation, legal filings, court fees, and months or years of persistence. And the proposed rule wouldn't streamline this, it would eliminate the option altogether. You may hear claims that this is about accuracy or fraud prevention, but that is wholly misleading. IDs already rely on multiple unique data points: name, birth date, social security number. Gender markers are not used to verify identity in any practical or legal sense. In fact, refusing to allow this administrative change increases confusion, not clarity. Make no mistake, this rule change will not protect Hoosiers. It will endanger them. It will put transgender people, especially young people, in more vulnerable positions. And for what? A symbolic gesture that accomplishes nothing other than cruelty. As a legal professional and as someone charged with advocating for LGBTQ+ young people across the state, I urge the BMV to reject this proposed rule. Let transgender and gender diverse Hoosiers continue to do what all of us want and deserve: to live safely, to navigate the world without fear, and to carry identification that reflects who we are. Thank you.
Jeremy Dexter.
Sorry, let me just find my notes. I probably have them up, but technology today is just a little bit of a crap show. And I think, based on what I just heard, there's so many smart people in this room. So I'm just going to talk about the impact of identifying someone by someone's sex. For those of you who are disposed more to Puritanism, I'm going to be talking about penises and vaginas, but the state made me do this, so sorry about that. So the justification for this in part says, quote, recording sex rather than gender identity on a license supports state interests in consistency and efficiency. So let's talk about sex. In 1984, Randy Evans, a member of the white national terrorist group, the Silent Brotherhood, was drinking in a bar when he struck up a conversation with a woman there named Stacy. After some time drinking, the two grabbed another six-pack and rented a motel room. Eventually, around 4 a.m., Randy decided to make his move on Stacy, sticking his hand down her pants. But Randy soon came across a surprise. Stacy did not have a vagina like Randy assumed. Stacy had a penis, right? This made Randy very mad, and I'm not going to get into the subsequent details because I did not provide trigger warnings. But what does the story reveal? Why am I digging back into deep history when I was 4 years old and talking about this event? I'm sure I could have found any number of events since then that tell a similar story to this. What it reveals is that when it comes to identifying someone's sex, you either have to take them on how they outwardly present, or you have to stick your hands down their hands, all right? So what are cops gonna do when they pull you over and you appear to be a man? What if I am a transgendered man and I appear like I am? Should the cop just assume that I'm a man? What if it says F on my driver's license? Does that help the cop in any way at all identify me as a person? I would maintain that it absolutely does not. And I don't really want cops going around sticking their hands down my pants to confirm. So if you guys don't want that as well, I would recommend opposing this rule as well. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate everyone.
Ken Malone.
Hi. I'm going to leave it to several of the great experts who are speaking and who have spoken or are going to speak to talk about facts, so I'm going to be a little personal. My name is Kit Malone. I was born in Evansville. I live in Indianapolis, and I've been a Hoosier for my whole life. My husband and I have a home, and we're raising a daughter who is quickly growing into a kind and beautiful young woman. My husband wanted to speak, but he's balancing a job while finishing his master's degree. I recently started a small business. I'm proud of my family, and that's why I bring them up. I'm proud of where we come from, even when it sometimes feels like where I come from isn't proud of me. Updating my ID wasn't some sort of vague affirmation, some sort of act that I did because I wanted that all-important bit of ink on my card. I didn't care much about the affirmation of the bureaucracy, and the letters on the card are just academic to me. I updated my ID because it was getting weird not to. I was getting looks. Sometimes murmurs. Sometimes people would ask intrusive personal questions in front of crowds of other people. Store clerks, movie theaters, bartenders, bank tellers, pharmacists, you can name it. A lot of us don't think about the number of times we hand that ID over to a stranger who could be anyone. And what that means to those of us who are being armed by politicians. We're being told by politicians that we are to be hated, and we're handing that ID over to complete strangers who may have all kinds of opinions about who we are. That's scary. So that shouldn't surprise anyone who's even watching the news for a second, right? We've all seen it. Even from the highest levels, we've seen the demonization of people who happen to be transgender. I really do think that this effort to restrict the access that we have to things like the ability to change our ID stems from that, and not an honest desire to serve the people of Indiana. The BMV has let us change that little bit of ink for decades, and Indiana has produced no evidence, zero evidence, that this harms any other Hoosiers. Instead, there's been some hand-waving about accuracy in record keeping. And what I want to say is, if the state is going to take something away that provides a little bit of safety for thousands of people, and we are talking about thousands of people, there should be more justification than simply, well, we kind of want to make sure that M and F is exactly right. And I don't see any justification. I don't see any sign that me having an F on my driver's license so I don't get harassed in the line at the bank harms my neighbor or picks their pocket. At the end of the day, that letter on the card is just ink. And if the biggest concern that you have is that we should make sure we've classified every Hoosier's reproductive biology on a plastic card, then I question the honesty of that justification. I get that some folks don't like us very much. Maybe you think we're weird or silly. Or maybe your faith tradition has something to say about us. I just think that if the government is going to take action to harm thousands of its citizens, it should have some real concrete justification beyond that hand-waving about accuracy. I am opposed to this change. Thank you.
Hi. This is a needlessly cruel change that only, sorry. The needlessly cruel change that will only, will affect thousands of people in our communities, and it serves no benefit to anyone. That's all.
I really appreciate the comments and everything everyone has said so far. While all the comments have been given in English, I have heard many languages today. The language of science, the language of humanism, the language of facts, the language of logic, the language of love, and the language of acceptance. And I am in opposition to this rule. And though I am not a believer, I want to use a language that I grew up with to try and help those who are advocating for these harmful changes to understand the harm they are causing. To paraphrase the words of Jesus, if ye have done it to the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So if those in power are going to pretend that they are doing this to protect people, to help people, I want them to look their Savior in the eyes, pretend that this is the person they are denying. They are saying, no, your idea is not valid here. No, you are less than. And I want them to realize that that is the cruelty and the hatred that policies and words like this are promoting. Thank you. Wow, it's hard to get on. We need an extra half hour.
Hi, my name is Mary Cohen. I did not plan on speaking. My comments will be very brief. I'm here as an advocate. I just want to say that it's often portrayed that the trans community is just a small handful of people, but I'm looking at a room that is full of advocates and trans people, and so it's kind of BS that this isn't going to affect a lot of people. It's going to affect the trans community. It's going to affect people that you love, but there's also the business aspect of it. Someone mentioned a bar. I'm thinking, how does this work? So I just want to say I am so opposed to this bill, and I hope it doesn't go through. So thank you.
My name is Gabriel Walters, and I'm here to speak in strong opposition to the proposed rule changes that would block individuals from changing the gender marker on their state-issued IDs. This process is already burdensome. Under current regulations, individuals must provide one of the following: a court order approving a name or gender marker change, a certified amended birth certificate reflecting the change, or a signed and dated statement from a licensed physician. Each of these requirements can take months to fulfill and cost hundreds of dollars. For many transgender people, especially those facing financial hardship housing insecurity, or limited access to affirming health care, this process is already a mountain to climb. These proposed changes will turn that mountain into a wall. Let's be clear, these changes are not addressing any demonstrated problem. There's no public safety crisis tied to gender marker changes. In fact, in the state's own regulatory analysis under Section 5, the benefit analysis explicitly states, the primary or direct benefits of this proposed rule are difficult to quantify, and the secondary or indirect benefits of this proposed rule are equally difficult to quantify. If the benefits are so negligible that even the authors of the proposed rule cannot clearly name them, then we have to ask why move forward, especially when the harm is so clear and so profound. This proposal is not about improving public administration. It's about restricting the dignity and autonomy of transgender people. It's about creating unnecessary barriers that further marginalize an already vulnerable community. And it sends a dangerous message that transgender people do not deserve to be seen or recognized for who they truly are. These changes are rooted not in sound policy, but in discrimination. They originate from Governor Mike Vaughn's executive order titled, Respecting the Biological Dichotomy Between Men and Women as a Fundamental and Deeply Rooted Legal Principle Embedded in Indiana Law. In that order, he asserts that the executive branch will recognize only the binary of men and women. This effectively writes transgender people out of legal existence in Indiana. It sends a chilling message that our identities are not real, that we are not valid, and that we are undeserving of equal protection under the law. I cannot stress how unsafe it is right now for queer people, especially transgender individuals, both here in Indiana and across America. Just this month, a church in Indianapolis said during a live stream service that queer people should be lined up and shot in the back of the head. This was said from the pulpit, openly, proudly. This is the climate that we're living in. When trans people are forced to carry IDs that don't align with their gender presentation, we are put at risk. Every time we hand over our ID, we are revealing personal, deeply sensitive information to someone who may not be a safe person to know it. That is not a hypothetical risk, it's a real one. I do not want to fear for my safety every time I present my ID. I do not want any trans person to have to worry that a routine interaction could become dangerous or life-threatening just because our documents don't reflect who we are. This proposal does nothing to improve public safety or administrative efficiency. What it does do is endanger transgender Hoosiers, strip away our dignity, and tell us that we do not belong. I urge you to reject these changes. Our lives and our right to exist as who we are deserve protection, not erasure. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Hattie Cable. I'm a Hoosier attorney and parent from Columbus, Indiana. I was also a proud state employee for 7.5 years before resigning last week. The regulatory analysis of the proposed rule has a section for impacted parties, as others have shared, where it simply lists none. This is deeply dishonest and disingenuous. To say that no one would be impacted by this change is a lie and an effort to pretend that transgender Hoosiers don't exist. The impacted parties of the proposed change are perhaps not me, perhaps not the people who drafted this rule, but tens of thousands of our transgender Hoosier siblings, regular people just trying to live their lives with dignity. The regulatory analysis states that the proposed rule will not result in cost savings for any individuals or businesses. In other words, this rule would simply make life more difficult for hardworking Hoosiers for no financial benefit to anyone. If the proposed amendment reflects a fundamental and deeply rooted principle of American legal history and tradition, then how come it wasn't already in place? It's almost like it's a step backwards for our state. Indiana already ranks among the worst states for LGBTQ people to live and work. Why would we want to make our own state even more unwelcoming for people to come live, work, and pay taxes here? I also want to speak to my state employee attorney colleagues. You don't have to do this. You don't have to be that person who is just following orders. You don't have to fall in line with this administration. I'm asking you to be brave and stand up for what's right. Thank you.
Jaden Emus.
You actually got it right. Congrats.
Good morning. That was really loud. My name is Jaden Emis, and I come before you today in honor of my personal friends and family who are gender diverse and transgender, as a Hoosier, and as a gender diverse Hoosier myself. I'm here to denounce the proposed change on gender markers on driver's licenses. I'm disturbed to see the transgender community being targeted again, as it reflects a larger effort to discriminate against transgender individuals that spans across the country. The proposed ban on gender marker changes, as well as the legal precedent it is based on, is being instituted in an attempt to eliminate transgender and gender diverse individuals from the public sphere. The push to recognize a solid unchanging male and a solid unchanging female identity negatively affects many Hoosiers, as I said, some of which are my dear friends and family. Not being able to change a gender marker is a very large issue for transgender people. Having a gender marker that does not reflect how you outwardly present can lead to many inconvenient situations, as well as downright dangerous situations. It is not safe to exist as a transgender or gender diverse individual. People will be forced to out themselves every time they show their ID to a bank teller, to a bar bouncer, to a police officer, because it does not match how they present. If the wrong person learns that an individual is transgender, this can lead to discrimination and physical violence. Transgender Hoosiers absolutely should have the dignity to live comfortably and safely. This proposed change actively works against this ideal. There is no reason as to why this should be instituted, except to discriminate against an already oppressed group of people for the sake of upholding an outdated status quo, which is why I and you should be against this ban on gender marker changes. Thank you.
Hi, I was not planning to speak today, but after hearing some of this testimony, I feel that I need to speak out about one particular impacted person, my daughter. My daughter is a young adult trans woman who is on the verge of living her fullest life. After a long struggle with mental health, she has recently secured a job. She passed her test to get her learner's permit, and she's learning how to drive. She's planning to move into an apartment with her girlfriend. All of these things will be negatively impacted by this change. The morning that she heard about this change, she was on her way to work, and she could almost not do her job that day. She was so affected by hearing that the state saw her as less than a full human being. She was in a panic, thinking that that brand new learner's permit that she just got, when she finally gets all of her hours and she does her driving test, that driver's license that she's worked so hard to get will have an inaccurate description of who she is. She was afraid how that might impact her ability to rent an apartment, and so began the downward spiral. So to say that this measure does not impact anyone is absolutely false, as we've heard today, and I urge in the strongest possible terms that this be rejected.
Good morning. My name is Brad Kallmeyer. I'm a resident of Boone County, and I'm an attorney.
I'm here this morning in opposition to this rule change for fundamental reasons that go much deeper than the discrimination against a specific community. My concern with this rule change is that it's, I don't believe that the state of Indiana has the authority to make this rule change because this is outside of the government's lane. My background is in science before I came to an attorney, and this rule change reminds me much of a bill that almost became a law in the 1890s in Indiana called the Indiana Pie Bill, where the Indiana legislature attempted to redefine the value for pi, which is the mathematical irrational number that's used when you're defining things like the area of a circle. The government doesn't have the authority to redefine facts of medical science. The facts are what they are, and redefining them only creates confusion. I ask that this rule change be rejected.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Higginbotham. I'm a retired Disciples of Christ woman and Bible scholar. And I'm here to speak out of my own particular area of expertise because as some analysis that have been presented don't that the true justification of this is a religious one. It's an attempt to impose a very narrow understanding of Christianity upon the entire state. I think it's important that that be stated and that it be refuted that that is some kind of universal Christian understanding, that there are many of us in the Christian tradition, as well as in other traditions, that understand that the world is not so simplistic and binary, that we believe that God created a world that is amazingly diverse and complex, and to try to reduce the world to some kind of narrow binary is essentially heretical and needs to be opposed. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was the name?
Eli Lucas.
Hello, my name is Eli Lucas. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for being here. It really is outstanding, the number of Hoosiers who've come out today to support transgender Hoosiers like me. So thank you, firstly. My name is Eli. My birth name is Leora Lucas. I'm a transgender Hoosier that works at a global Fortune 500 company here in Indianapolis. I was born in Carmel, raised by loving and very supportive parents. It's important for you to hear that this rule affects hardworking, tax-paying citizens like me. Legislation like this hurts me, hurts Hoosiers. Without access to an ID that accurately reflects me and my gender, here are things I have and will continue to experience. Employment issues, like discrimination when presenting an ID that doesn't match how I present. Healthcare barriers, like being denied or receiving inadequate healthcare, or emergency situations where a mismatched ID causes confusion for emergency responders. Travel and transportation, enhanced scrutiny at airports. Housing discrimination problems. Problems with background checks or lease agreements. Legal vulnerabilities, for example, as mentioned earlier, complications during police interactions. And daily life challenges, including humiliation when purchasing age-restricted items, an increased risk of discrimination and violence when broadly forced to present an ID that is incongruent with how I present. This proposed rule shouldn't go into effect because it's about human dignity and safety for Hoosiers. Accurate ID isn't a privilege. It's a basic necessity for participating in our society. We, transgender Hoosiers, are your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends, and your family who simply want to live without fear, to get a job, to see a doctor, to travel safely, and move through the world as the rest of you do. Sincerely, Eli.
Sonder Collins was not planning to talk today, but very moved by everybody here who has had the courage to just show up. I think I want to acknowledge one thing. Was it easy for everybody to get here? Did you know it was going to be at a random Tuesday morning? I hate this, and I think it's intentional. It might as well have been at the dead of night. And I think it's clear that they wanted to get away with this. If they were, sorry, Sarah, if they were proud to do this, why not get up at the State House and scream it? Why not talk about how great this is, how good this is going to be for the state? They're not doing that because what good is it going to do for the state or the people? It's not. So I think that says a lot and speaks volumes. Something I say quite frequently when people at work are being idiots and saying really stupid things, you kind of have to tone them down and say, what are you trying to accomplish with that? What are you trying to accomplish by saying that? Trying to hone in exactly what they're trying to do, which typically, there's no justification for it. In addition to that, I would love the BMV to guess what's on my driver's license. And if not, I'd love for you to tell me what I should put on it. What do you think my name is? What do you think my gender marker is? I'd love for you to guess. And you can't, because it's none of your damn business. I'd like to close with a poem I found yesterday, which I think works pretty well to reflect, trans, gender diverse, and intersex people in the state who this will impact. It's called They, Them. I'm not sure who the author is, so if anybody could find it out, would be great. If God created night and day and dawn, of course, and dusk, and the tangerine rose pink sunset, and the deep, deep amethyst twilight, and the infant bright of morning, then to perceive the world in binary is to forego knowledge of the divine.
Sean Coons.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Sean Coons, and I'm speaking out of concern. Out of concern for these proposed changes to the BMV policies that will prevent transgender people from updating their gender marker on their IDs. Let's say it clearly again, and it's been said clearly and better than I'm going to say it, but these changes would make life more difficult and in many cases more dangerous for thousands of Hoosiers who rely on their identification for nearly every aspect of public life: driving, getting a job, opening a bank account, getting prescriptions, traveling, voting. If an ID doesn't reflect the person carrying it, that individual is immediately put at risk of embarrassment, of harassment, even worse. Imagine being asked to prove who you are, and your own government-issued ID calls that into question. Nearly 1 in 4 transgender people who lack updated ID documents report being harassed, denied service, or even assaulted, simply because their ID does not match how they present. This is not a hypothetical. This is daily reality for way too many. Allowing transgender Hoosiers to update their ID does not harm a single person. The BMV already has strong fraud protections in place. These changes are not about preventing fraud. They're about preventing people from living their lives with dignity and with safety. As a pastor of Fairview Presbyterian Church, just 46 blocks north here on Capitol Street, I speak from personal experience walking alongside several transgender congregation members. These are people I know. These are people I care about deeply. They show up to serve. They show up to worship. They support others in our community. Mismatched identification can take an emotional toll on them. It's not just a piece of plastic. It's a daily affirmation of who they are, or a daily reminder that their identity is being denied. These proposed changes would further marginalize people who are already vulnerable. It would make it harder for them to participate in society and even feel safe doing so. My faith calls me to love my neighbors and affirm their dignity, and this policy does just the opposite. It's been stated that the benefits are hard to quantify. That's disingenuous. They are not. The benefits are very easy to quantify, and the benefit is fear. Continue picking on a vulnerable population to make those in power get more power. I respectfully urge the BMV to reject this proposal and continue supporting policies that allow all Hoosiers to live with safety, with dignity, and with equality. Thank you.
I'm just here to support the speakers.
I apologize because I didn't prepare anything to speak today, but I've been inspired by everyone who has had the bravery to speak and all the support today. I oppose this rule change. I grew up in Indiana. I was born in Logansport, Indiana. I went to Indiana University where I studied biology, by the way. And I've lived in Indianapolis and served the community and working in healthcare for the past 5 years. I'm also trans. And I think that this rule has no benefit. It is rooted in bigotry. If I'm correct, I think it stems from an executive order saying that biological sex is binary, male and female. Well, we know for a fact that intersex people exist, so that right there is wrong. Also, gender presentation is different than sex, and when someone looks at your ID and it doesn't match your gender presentation, it causes more confusion than it helps. And I know that from personal experience as well. So, like people have said before, I think that this rule only hurts people and it doesn't help anyone. And thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm Christine Garrison. A lot of smart people talked before me, so one of my points are already been made. I'm going to tell my story. I was born in Anderson, Indiana, in the 60s. I have an engineering degree from Purdue. I've worked in information technology for IU here in Indianapolis since 2001. I own a house, I pay taxes, and my wife and I celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. Woohoo! I am a Hoosier. I belong here. I've been transgender my whole life. I lived in fear of being outed until 10 years ago when I finally started my social, medical, and legal transition. And then I got I had to get my doctor's letter together. I went to court with I changed my name and gender marker in the Social Security database, on my Indiana driver's license, my passport, and my birth certificate. I finally felt whole and unafraid. Having an ID that doesn't match my appearance and identity won't match the Social Security database. So when I file my taxes, what do I put? Ignoring medical professionals and court orders is harmful. The state is, I'm sorry, I jotted down notes this morning, breakfast in a hurry. And as everyone said, it will put me in danger by outing me. If you've heard of a thing called the Transgender Day of Remembrance, it's the day we remember the people like us who were killed for being who we are. And that's a real danger, among others. There's plain old discrimination is one, that also much worse. And someone already mentioned the church that has been calling for the deaths of LGBTQ people. Whether we kill ourselves or are executed by the state, that's what they want. My wife has been out on the last 2 Sundays protesting this church. Let's put it this way. When my ID says M on it, I will have more to fear in everyday life. I don't want to go back to living in fear. And that's all I have to say.
Alexander.
Hello, good morning. Bringing up the rear of this beautiful slate of speakers, I'm so proud of you all for being here on a Tuesday morning, everyone's favorite time to go to a government building with a bunch of strangers who they don't know. Talk about the BMV, everyone's favorite. Even though you're all so passionate, I'm so proud of you for being here. I'm so proud of you for speaking even though you're scared. I'm also scared. I'm proud of you for showing up for people who aren't like you. To the cisgender allies, thank you. To the trans people, my favorite, admittedly. I'm even more proud of you because I know how scary it is. I know that if you're further in your transition and living stealth, you're scared of outing yourself, you're scared of this will go viral and you will be targeted. I am also scared of that. I know that if you're early in your transition, you don't look the way people think you should, and you're afraid that they'll laugh at you for saying you deserve to have an ID that matches who you are. I understand that fear. Last weekend, I had an open house where I invited everyone I know, and I know a lot of people, to come to my place. We would eat chili. I would cook brownies. And they would write a letter to Kevin opposing this. And I'm sorry, Kevin, I did tell them to be polite. When they opposed this, I told them to use polite language. But to write a handwritten letter to say, this is dangerous, it puts someone I love at risk, it puts me at risk. And people showed up for me. People who didn't have much in common. My community choir showed up for me. My little old church ladies showed up for me.
my very patient pastor, with a little collar, showed up for me. My anarchist trans friends showed up for me, and they all sat together and looked at each other and were like, we do not have much in common, but we have this in common. We oppose this. We believe that, music, we oppose this rule change. We believe that our friend here should be able to say who he is. He should be able to buy a movie ticket. He should be able to pick up a case of beer, or two, if he needs it. He should be able to go to the doctor and catch a flight. He should not be able to go into the women's restroom with this little mail on his card. It's silly. It's foolishness. This rule change doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anyone, and it puts us at risk. It doesn't just put me at risk. It puts cis people at risk too, and I think some of you know that. If you present a little differently, if you are a little atypical, if you're a guy who's really pretty, if you're a lady who shaves your head or maybe has facial hair, I know you're out there, it puts you at risk too, and you know that. I'm so worried about the future. A lot of my trans friends have already fled the state. The ones with the means to do so, they've gotten out of here. And they are texting me and being like, are you okay? And I'm like, no. I'm sticking it out. Because I love my home. Even if it doesn't love me back. I love my home. I love the people here. Even the ones who don't love me back. I cannot overstate how dangerous this is. If they can order you to have an ID that makes a liar out of you, well, it makes a liar out of me. My faith tradition says to tell the truth, and I have filled out paperwork and gone to doctor's appointments and gotten court hearings, and I have tried so hard to tell the truth, even when it puts me in danger. Because of my faith, because of the deep love I have for my neighbors, I have tried. Do you know how passionate I have to be about something to fill out paperwork on purpose? how deeply I must care about this issue to willingly show up to a doctor's office and fill out another form? Oh my gosh, I can't overstate. If you can get me to fill out paperwork, it's because I care. I care so much. And my trans friends who have already fled the state are writing me saying, you're so brave, and I'm like, I'm really not. I'm really, really not. I'm just very stubborn. I'm not brave. Love is the only reason to stick it out. Love for my neighbors, love for my trans friends, love for the people who do not have the means to flee, who wish they could get out and can't. I stick it out for them. I stick it out for you guys. Showed up on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. at a government building, everyone's favorite place to be. I oppose this. I oppose this in the strongest possible terms because of my faith, because of my deep love for my neighbors, because I deserve to be seen and to tell the truth and to carry an ID that does not make a liar out of me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. No matter what happens, we have each other, okay? Stay safe. Keep fighting. You can't win them all, but I'm proud of you for fighting. Thank you for your time.
I apologize in advance for my stammering. Public speaking is like my biggest fear. Just echo some of the previous speakers that getting here was quite a challenge.
I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I live in Fort Wayne, so it was quite a drive. I've never driven this far away from Fort Wayne before, so that was kind of an experience going down 465. Suddenly the lane ends and I'm going around the corner. So that was quite a lot. But I spent a lot of my life, prior to realizing I was trans, prior to transitioning, just trying to be invisible. And before I realized I was trans, that was I didn't know why. I wanted to kind of ghost, around, especially in college. It was sort of like go into the room, take my notes, take my tests, leave, go back home, go to work, whatever. And I didn't always understand why, but eventually I did, and now, I'm going to live kind of out loud. I'm going to, speak up and, actually, try to change things, and try to live here. So when I heard about this, a couple of weeks ago, I've had, different things kind of ping pong around my head. I read through the recent court case that was referenced in, the different rule, analysis. And so I've just got a few items kind of ping pong, around my head. So first, this is inefficient. I come from my 3 eyes. So it's inefficient. I've heard, currently the Attorney General is currently, intervening directly into birth certificate, changes. A rule change like this that takes away this right to, change your gender marker, it's not going to erase, transgender Hoosiers. We're still going to be here. We're still going to be trying to work the system. We're still going to be trying to live our lives, and we're still going to be trying to change that gender marker. It's going to require government funds to continue to kind of hold us back, kind of a retaining wall, kind of holding us in place. So it's not efficient to do this. It's inconsistent. So one of the things they talked about accurate record keeping, and it needs to be consistent with your sex assigned at birth and everything on your driver's license. But the other things on your driver's license are not consistent, are not held to the same standard. But I remember when I got my driver's license, they asked me what my eye color was. They didn't look at my eyes and say this is the color they are. They asked me how tall I was. I told them how tall I was. They wrote that down. Since then, I've changed, my weight, I've changed my, and so on, and I've told them, I need to update this, and then they changed it, and that was fine. When, I got my gender marker changed, I had to go to court. I had to ask a judge, I had to, go to Allen County Superior Court building with all the frescoes and everything, and explain to a judge why I felt, that this was correct. And then I had to come and update all of these documents. I go to BMV. I had to sit there and wait while they called into the legal office. I sat there for like half an hour while I was waiting for the decision whether they could, change this one little character in the system. So it's inconsistent with the rest of the things on your driver's license, and I think it's insufficient. It doesn't. This rule change and getting rid of this ability to make the change, and even harkening back to maybe disagreeing with the court, as far as getting rid of the non-binary markers, these rules changes are insufficient to encapsulate all Hoosiers. You have an in-group whose documents are correct. Everything is consistent and fine, and then you have a small group that is out. Their documents are incorrect. They get discriminated against. Everything's kind of wrong for them. And so I think, kind of, in conclusion, if the government's going to make a rule like this, it should be, if they're going to, come to an interpretation of what the law is, an interpretation of what gender means in the law. It should, they should err on the side of protecting people and not harming people. They should err on the side of compassion and not cold indifference. We have to keep accurate records. We have to keep your biological sex on file because we need to know what your reproductive capacity is at a traffic stop. So, yes, what I'm saying is I disagree with this rule. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
just from a block away or even just Indianapolis. I'm here in Fort Wayne, Anderson. That's beautiful. So many points have already been brought up that, you know, I was running through my head today about, oh, I need to bring up this, oh, I need to bring up this. There's so many people that have brought it up so eloquently. So I guess the only thing I can really add at this point is I'm opposed to this because personally, my partner has chimerism. And I'm looking at this going, okay, if we're going to go to this step of we only recognize male and female, and that's the only markers we can put, what, as somebody pointed out earlier about, okay, so you're going to go to a traffic stop and stick your hand down your pants to find out. Not cool, not going to happen. But say you don't go to that point. Say you go to some, let's face it, we're getting into a technological future where they decide to stick you with a needle just to find out what your gender is. It's not going to match what's on some people's IDs, but even in a personal case of mine, you go ahead and stick my partner with a needle just to find out their genetic makeup. Well, my partner has male and female genetic markers. So what happens in that case? They can't be identified as M or F, so they're lying either way. Like I said, I did not plan on speaking today, but that's really the only thing I can add, that I'm opposed to this because we've all seen how slippery these slopes can get. So that's all.
Samantha Bresnahan.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Samantha Bresnahan, and I'm here on behalf of the ACLU of Indiana. Our organization is dedicated to defending the rights and civil liberties of all Hoosiers. We are here today to express our deep concern about the impact these proposed changes to BMV policy will have on transgender Hoosiers. We respectfully urge the BMV to want to clarify the ruling in Indiana Motor Vehicles v. Simmons, which is cited in the regulatory analysis. While the analysis suggests the court requires credentials to reflect sex assigned at birth, the actual ruling addressed only whether the BMV must offer an X gender marker. The court did not weigh in on when an M or F gender marker is appropriate, and it did not prohibit the current practice of issuing documents aligned with the person's gender identity. In fact, since the decision, the BMV has continued to permit licenses to be issued based on gender identity, indicating that it remains legally permissible to do so. We believe it's important to be clear. This proposed policy change is not mandated by the courts. It's a political decision made by the current administration. All of us need accurate and consistent identity documents that reflect who we are. Denying transgender, non-binary, and intersex Hoosiers the ability to update the gender marker on their driver's license puts them at greater risk of harassment, discrimination, and violence, as many people have spoken to this morning. National survey data shows that many transgender people have been harassed, denied services, or even assaulted simply because their ID didn't match their appearance. In these situations, they may also face false accusations of fraud. These are real and serious consequences that could result from the BMV making this rule change. The proposed changes send a harmful message that transgender Hoosiers are not fully included or protected under state policy. But transgender Hoosiers are our neighbors, our family members, and our friends. And like all Indiana residents, they deserve equal access to safety, dignity, and full participation in public life. Denying access to accurate identity documents will only increase the stigma and danger that transgender people face and further isolate them from public life. For all of these reasons, we strongly oppose the proposed changes and urge the BMV to reconsider its position. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
morning, my name is TK. I already submitted this via email, so for the sake of time and for this, the beautiful people in this room and the love that I've been experiencing, I'll just channel Jesus. If there was a table to flip, he would do that. And he would also say something about hypocrites. And that is my time.
Didn't think I'd have to put that down. In 2021, an ACLU piece quite frankly states that already in 2019, a Marion County judge, along with the doctors and therapists of local Hoosier Everett Elliott, agreed that their legal gender should match their confirmed gender identity, which is also mine as non-binary. A UCLA study shows that I am one of 1.2 million people in the United States who identify this way, and all of our experiences are wildly unique. Save for one thing that I get to share with my trans parent and my found trans family. And I lose my spell. A consistent effort by others to try and tell us that we are wrong to know ourselves in the way that we do. Growing up in a system of gender roles and archetypes that we do not fit into or are not welcome in makes it all the more important and meaningful that my community is recognized and gets to feel safe. We are not small, we are not niche, and we are not the insults that I have had screamed at my face. Mentally diseased, mentally deficient, wrong, and any number of slurs. I am sick of being excluded. I am sick of not seeing my community. I am valid. My community is valid. And we are not going anywhere just because a handful of fundamentalists are uncomfortable that they just now noticed us. The world will keep on turning, no matter what happens, and we will all still be here. So thank you so much for being here today, as stated earlier, on a Tuesday morning in Indianapolis, in a backroom conference room. Thank you for being here. It is so meaningful. You are seen, you are loved, and I'm going to vibrate my way back to my seat.
I need a pole wall.
I'm not trans, but you would look at me and call me female. You would be partially right. Gender is who we say we are, right? I don't have a uterus. I don't have fallopian tubes. I don't have ovaries. I don't have a cervix. I cannot reproduce. What am I? I tell you, I'm a female. That's what should be on my driver's license. That's how I present. I can't reproduce. I don't have organs to do that. They were diseased, they were taken out, I had surgery, I'm altered. But I'm telling you, I'm a female. That's how I present, even though I don't have the organs. It makes me feel weird that we are talking about sexual organs in such a way that no one would question me that I've had a full hysterectomy and that I'm still a female. No one would question that. Why are we questioning anyone else? My uncle had testicular cancer and had his testicles removed. Is he not a man? I mean, how are we, this whole gender discussion is just strange to me. We are who we say we are. Just think about that. It's the people who have had altered sexual organs and removed, and it just never occurred to me, and I guess I'm feeling a oneness with the people who are trans here. I've had my sex organs removed due to disease, and no one has questioned me. It's just, I don't know, I'm really feeling that in my heart and soul right now, and I'm kind of feeling guilty about it. I mean, it's like, I had the surgery to remove those organs, and no one has said, well, what are you now? And those kind of surgeries have been going on for years, and nobody's questioned. So, I'm here for you. I'm an advocate. I see you. I love you. And I oppose this because we are who we say we are. Is that something?
I'm a state leader organizer of 51. I'm also the Chief Security Director. I am also a United States Navy combat veteran. I've fought for this country and I've shed blood 3 times. Thomas Jefferson proclaimed fundamental rights of all individuals, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It also asserted the principle that the government derived their just powers from the consent of the governed. However, today, we have a government, both federal and state, who have chosen to stray from the black words written in the Constitution to their own personal feelings and beliefs. There are those of hate. Why? Why is there so much hate among our legislators? It's time our legislators start listening to the people like we used to. Reread the Constitution. The state needs to worry about many other projects in the state, not the hate of a small minority group. We've heard today so many that are afraid. I see it in your face. I've seen it when you come up to speak. And I feel for you. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of the people that sit in that office over there and want to put this hate on each and every one of you and make you afraid. I am not afraid. I am standing here today, and I will stand out there every day that we have a protest on the South Lawn of the Capitol, and I will speak. My face has been put nationally all over the internet because of what I'm doing, and I'm fighting for our fundamental rights to exist. I'm angry. I'm hurt. And even I am afraid at times. Because we're human. Every morning I have to get up and put one foot in front of the other, put a smile on my face, because I can't let this win over me. And it's not going to win. And it's not going to win over you either. I've been living my best life for 28 years now, and not until this year have I experienced so much hate. I transitioned 28 years ago, and I've never experienced the hate that I have in just this year alone. That hate is force-fed into the American people right now, and there's so many people scooping up, eating every little bit of it up. Or is it the fact that so many people have so much hate in them, and they're giving a motive to move forth with their own hate? Could be. This agenda, or the MAGA movement, or is a white Christian national movement, this is merely about power. They hold the need for more of it. They can't get enough. Change is coming. It is also inevitable. We can continue moving forward, not backwards 50 years, because it's exactly where we're going, 50 years back. I do not approve of this change. This needs to be squashed. Stop the hate. Let love win. Thank you for your time.
Hi there, Scott Johnson, State Organizer, Indiana 5051. There have been so many great comments here. Thank you, everyone. A couple of points that I want to make. The role of the government is to serve the people. The people do not serve the government. The government's responsibility is to serve and protect our most vulnerable members. That is why we have so many laws that cover children, because they are our most vulnerable members. And today, in the current climate of hate, trans people are the most vulnerable people in our society. I see this at every single protest. Now, finally, for a party that campaigned on fiscal responsibility, well, I'm a software engineer. I build large, complex software systems. That's what I've done since 1987. And taking out functionality is not a simple thing, okay? The BMV is proposing that they're going to spend our taxpayer money to fund their hate. What I'd like to know is, what does this cost? How many millions of dollars is it going to cost to rewrite large portions of the BMV's code base, which is old, antiquated, and complex? How hard is this going to make our lives as people have to interact with the BMV, right? And I'm not disagreeing with any ethical point. My point is also that the Republican Party campaigned on fiscal responsibility. They want to make things cheaper, better. So why are you spending money to promote hate? This is Governor Braun's personal agenda. This is not the people's agenda. The government is here to serve the people. And what I see is it's serving itself. Thank you.
Good morning. I
was born here in Indiana and have been a resident of Indiana for the last 30 years. I graduated with my master's in philosophy from IU Indy, and I would like to first mention a few things I'm not going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk about the ethics of this rule change, even though I'm probably most qualified to do that, because I don't think this is the point at which that we can change that in this particular issue. I'm not going to talk about emotional content, although I am emotionally invested in this as the husband of a trans man and the father of a non-binary child. Many people have spoken from their heart today. I don't need to cover that again. What I would like to speak about is the language in this rule. Now, I believe is either confusing or deficient. This isn't emotion, this isn't opinion. These are questions I have and things I think will need to be clarified in this rule for it to proceed. First of all, throughout the history and background of the rule in section 1, there are references to essentially common sense. There seems to be an understanding that the common sense definition, we all know what sex is. Gender, the rule acknowledges, is confusing, but sex is simple, male or female. That's not very clear. As many people say, there are a number of issues with that. And then when the court ruled that gender equals sex, okay, well, you first have to define gender, you have to define sex in order to say that. Otherwise, you're saying Visbin equals flawed. It's just a nonsensical statement, and the court has apparently not chosen to define either of those terms precisely, and the BMV has not went any further in that. I understand that the BMV has a legal obligation to enforce the executive order and to change the rule to follow the executive order. I'm not in Mike Vaughn's head. I don't know what he was thinking when he made this decision, so I can't comment on that either. But in addition to that piece of confusion, there's also a comment, and this is, perhaps I may be straying a bit, I may not be understanding the language correctly, I'm not an attorney, I'm a philosopher. But when we talk about the estimate of primary and direct benefits of the rule, what we get is they're vague and difficult to quantify. Under cost analysis, the estimate of compliance costs and regulation, and again, difficult to quantify. I think if we're going to pass a rule that affects even one Hoosier resident, we need the language to be clear. I need to know what the costs, what the benefits are of this thing. That's not saying, for all you know, I might be a staunch Republican, I might believe in this rule, but I still need to know what the rule means if I'm going to follow the rule in any event, regardless of my political affiliation or beliefs on the matter. Furthermore, in a more general sense, this may be, again, I don't understand the language completely, I'm not an attorney, I may be straying from the language somewhat, but the only benefit, well, the only benefit essentially is that we're complying with the government lagging behind and had not yet accepted marriage equality. When that was going on, large corporations, large companies, GenCom was ready to leave Indianapolis. The NCAA was ready to leave Indiana entirely. If the rule passes as written, if these changes are implemented, Democrat concern, that's not a Republican concern, that's my pocket, my money concern. Everybody in here, some of you, for all I know, half the people in here support this rule. I don't know. But if you do, this still affects your pocketbook, this affects your wallet, this affects your bottom line. The vagueness of this rule, the ignored financial aspects of this rule should matter to every Hoosier, regardless of your beliefs on the matter. And so for that reason, I propose that, if not entirely rejected, this rule change at least be postponed indefinitely until these problems, as well as others I may not have foreseen, can be prepared. Thank you.
And whenever they present their license, this is especially pernicious because the use of a state-issued identity document is legally required in many of these instances. We all know in the present day there are many people who are transphobic and object to the very notion of a person being transgender, including our governor. On the internet, there are countless examples of transgender people being told they should kill themselves. Indeed, at least one Indianapolis-based church preaches this very message from the pulpit on Sundays. There are multiple examples of transgender people being subjected to harassment and violence simply because they are transgender. This rule forces them to be identified as transgender every single time they must present a driver's license, and thus opens them to risk and threats. The harm to them is quite real and immediate when they present that ID. And they have no way to know in advance who may view their ID and decide to hassle or attack them. There is no evidence that having gender markers that align with one's gender identity create any risks or harms to others. Further, having an ID that conforms to one's gender identity does not in any way undermine or operate counter to any rational state objective. Instead, this proposed rule change has no valid purpose. It only seeks to pass into law the religious and political gender ideology of those in power. In doing so, it targets a small and politically isolated group of Hoosiers and puts them at significant and tangible risk. The professed rationale for the rule change is to bring it in alignment with a case that doesn't even apply to what the rule covers, the Simmons case. This rationale is completely erroneous. The Simmons case ruled only that the state was not required to allow non-binary people to have an X gender marker on their driver's license. It said absolutely nothing about this rule. It said absolutely nothing that required this rule to be changed. This is a big leap, and that's all it is. This is not a rule change that has any basis in the Simmons case. Moreover, the Simmons case is not an Indiana Supreme Court ruling that's binding on the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, even if it covered this topic. In fact, the Indiana Supreme Court has not yet addressed this issue. So the notion that somehow the Simmons case requires this, and that is the sole basis that BMV has to argue this rule change, doesn't even apply. The fact is that the existing rule has allowed Indiana residents to update their gender marker on their driver's license and state-issued IDs for decades. The Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles has presented no data or evidence to support its claim that current processes have led to fraud or administrative burden. Conversely, written comments have been submitted that include a substantial body of research documenting the real-world harms that transgender people face when they are denied accurate identification. And then we've heard your personal stories today that confirm on an individual level that any evidence or argument presented in support of the rule change. That no evidence or argument has been presented to support the rule speaks pretty loud, doesn't it? There is nothing to rebut because there's nothing to support this rule other than citing a case that doesn't even say what they say it does. This is disingenuous. As the parent of a transgender person, I have firsthand knowledge of the harm this proposed change to the rule would make. I urge you to keep the present rule without change. This rule change puts transgender Hoosiers at risk from the time they get their first driver's license till the day they die. It is a cruel cudgel to try to beat transgender Hoosiers into the closet by putting them at risk every time they must present their ID, simply to go about their daily life, something the state requires us to do, to present that ID. The rule rule change should be rejected. Thank you very much.
Full disclosure, I'm married to that previous speaker, and one of my 5 kids is also.
What a coincidence.
You've heard many wonderful testimonies. I too reject this rule change wholeheartedly. We need our ID so many times. We need to go see your doctor, get your blood, buy some cigarettes, enroll in school, get a job, rent a place to live, find a car, rent a car, even buy a car. If you speed, it's that ID you'll need. Get your cash and your passport, get on a plane, take a break on a beach in a sunny place, buy a beer with a friend at a club downtown, so much fun until someone goes down, get a library card, get some bowling shoes, get a loan, buy a house, even go to vote. Wait, that's not funny. We need our IDs. We can't disenfranchise folks. This is an important population. Everybody deserves their dignity. IDs are basic for safety, dignity. If a trans person is forced to show an ID that doesn't reflect how they live, they're subject to increased harassment. We've heard this. Trans people already face higher levels of violence and abuse. We already know this. Taking away the ability to update one's ID prevents thousands of law-abiding Hoosiers like you, like me, from doing their jobs, contributing to society, living a public life. Keep the rule as it is. Trans folks belong here.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Gina Jorgensen. I teach at Butler University in the Department of History, Anthropology, and Classics. I'm also affiliate faculty with Gender, Race, and Sexuality Studies. I'm here to speak in opposition to this proposed rule and start with a hypothetical as I might with a class of my college students. Who knows what percentage of the world's population is redheads? Maybe 1 to 2%. The number varies, but we're talking, again, 1 to maybe 3% of the population can be identified as redheads. Now, if some government decided to make rules that targeted redheads and made their lives incredibly difficult on a daily, ongoing basis, that made them the victims of cruel oppression, that would seem weird. Even if 1% of the population is like kind of a small number of people, why would you do that? So, as other speakers have noted, biological sex is very difficult to pin down. Are we talking your chromosomes, your anatomical features, your hormones and other secondary sex characteristics? Like, a bit of a minefield. That's what all the scholarship points at. I'm going to give you some citations. I already emailed one letter to the BMV, but y'all are getting another one with many more citations. I hope everyone enjoys having homework. So, Dr. Rougharden's book, Evolution's Rainbow, talks about how there are multiple sexes in the animal kingdom, from fungi to fishes to frogs to all kinds of things. Even among mammals, we have many intersex examples, mammals that change from male to female under a variety of perspectives. So assuming that sex can only be a male-female binary is a bit of a restricted and inaccurate view of the world. Dr. Fausta Sterling in her 2012 book says maybe 2% of the human population is intersex. And I want to be clear here, I am not intentionally conflating intersex, trans, and non-binary populations in terms of their circumstances and life experience. But for our purposes here, they are all gender diverse in some way, so I will be talking about them together to some degree. Another publication talking about how difficult it is to pin down biological sex in humans, Healy and co-authors in 2014, in a review of nearly 700 elite athletes, found that 16.5% of men had testosterone levels below agreed upon limits for biological men, and 13.7% of women had testosterone levels above average levels for women. So again, what is biological sex? We can't pin that down very easily. Other estimates of population numbers, so Herman with co-authors from 2017, this is a UCLA study, found that maybe 0.6 to 0.7 of the US population is trans, but a later study by Herman and her co-author says that among U.S. adults, maybe 0.5% of the population is trans. That's 1.3 million people. And that's a higher number among youth, 1.4% of U.S. youth identify as trans. So going back to my opening numbers, say redheads are 1 to 2% of the population, would we make laws discriminate against them? If trans, intersex, and non-binary people are, again, 1, 2, 3, whatever percent of the population, why would we make laws arbitrarily and cruelly discriminating against them? And I want to be clear, there are some boundless, mostly baseless accusations of mental health issues and so on, and there are many studies find that there is depression in trans people coming from a number of multifaceted areas, that they have higher risks and levels of depression, anxiety, suicidality, and so on. Gender-affirming care lessens these risks. Gender-affirming care is an important healthcare feature that everyone deserves to have access to. And I also want to be clear that it is incredibly ableist of the government to look at people with mental health issues and say, oh, we need to discriminate against you more. I also study disability rights, that's another one of my areas. So why would we do that? So I'm going to point out these mental health issues to say that this is a population that's often marginalized and facing additional burdens and difficulties in life. And I'm sure that you all know the statistics, but Westbrook in 2023 published that trans people, especially trans women of color, are at higher risk of being murdered in many situations. They're at higher risk of poverty, homelessness, and so on. And I say this again to make the point that we are looking at a population that is marginalized, that is facing increased difficulties in life in a variety of vectors, and the government says, oh, let's make their lives harder, on purpose. I take issue with that. There's also a growing literature on how anxiety, depression, and toxic stress are caused by microaggressions, right? So when we're talking about this population that struggles with mental health issues, it's not because they're broken or whatever, it's because of this discrimination that they face on a daily basis. And this bears out in populations that are discriminated against because of racism, because of ableism, and many other identity factors. So this is a common experience. In fact, the APA, the American Psychological Association, calls trans suicide risk a public health crisis. Findings from the 2015 transgender survey find that trans adults have suicide ideation 12 times that of the general U.S. population. So again, why is the government looking at this population saying, yeah, let's make your lives harder? I also looked up the Indiana Bill of Rights, which I had never done before. That was really interesting. I encourage you all to do so. Article 1 of Section 1 says, all people are created equal with inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I was thinking about these inalienable rights, who deserve this. Oftentimes we have this conversation about born or given identity. So a lot of the human rights literature says, like, let's say that you are born and your skin is a certain color. For someone to discriminate against you on that basis is wrong and should be illegal and all of these other things. And then there's again, like a complicated scientific literature on how much people are given to a given gender identity, sexuality since birth, again, complex literature there. But I think some people who don't understand trans people think, oh, it's a choice, it's whatever. We have this conversation about sexuality as well. And even if it were a choice, identity categories should be protected in all cases. And in fact, the Indiana Bill of Rights gives us precedent for that. It says in Section 3 that it guarantees free exercise and enjoyment of religious opinions. Well, hey, if you can choose your religion, and we should all respect that, if gender and sexuality were a choice, gee, we should respect that too. So looking at some of our state's founding documents, it seems that there is a basis, there is an argument to respect every Hoosier's identity, whether inborn or whether chosen. We should respect that and give everyone the equal opportunity to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I have no stake in this that I know of. I mean, I haven't had my karyotype done, have you? But at the same time, some of you have brought up the larger issues. So I moved here from California to do my PhD at Indiana University, and I moved here and I started hearing this phrase I'd never heard before in my life, brain drain. What's that? Brain drain is where young Hooters get an education and GTFO, pardon my language. And let's see opportunity elsewhere. And so I'm thinking to myself, wow, even if we're, again, only talking 1, 2, 3% of the population might be gender diverse, how many job applicants might come to Indiana with close family members or they themselves? Are we gonna drive these people away? We are the crossroads of America. We host Gen Con, we host all kinds of cool things. How much business are we driving away? How much intellectual and creative power? What are we doing to our communities by just deliberately and cruelly targeting 1, 2, 3% of the population? Not to mention the ethical problems and the, I might say, moral rot implicated in targeting an already victimized and marginalized population. I want to just end with a sort of academic footnote that this executive order conflating gender with sex is ignoring 200 plus years of feminist and other scholarship saying that it is inaccurate and insulting to conflate gender and sex. And as another speaker has pointed out, how are we defining biological sex in the first place? Again, organs, anatomy, reproductive things. So conflating someone's organs, which you may or may not even have, and a variety of things, and like, I think genetic testing is expensive. Conflating all of these things with your identity and your worth as a human being is wrong, insulting, and it's a threat to all Hoosiers. And again, I've got citations if you want them. If anybody wants some homework, like they're all going to be getting in their emails tonight.
Good morning. I am Liliana Young. I am here from Bloomington. And as one of my wonderful, beautiful sisters pointed out, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is one of the most fundamental American principles. It is also the first legal principle in the Indiana State Constitution. Article 1, Section 1, it is the first highest law in the state. Does this policy change bring life? No, but considering the trans community's long, dark history with cops, the difference between how a person presents and what their ID says might get some of us killed. It has in the past. Does it bring liberty? No. If trans people are between 1 and 2% of the population, then between 70 and 140,000 Hoosiers will lose liberty to this policy change. It's as though you take the entire city of Evansville and tell them that they cannot participate equally in society or legal life. Does this bring the pursuit of happiness to anybody? Again, no. In fact, it egregiously obstructs the pursuit of happiness. If somebody's pursuit of happiness is to be found through changing markers on their identification documents, that is their business alone. So whatever benefits could there be? The very proposal states that there's no cost benefit. It says that primary and secondary benefits are vague and hard to quantify. So why are we even here? We're here because the people in charge of the state government are on a crusade to deal as much damage to the Indiana trans community as possible. We know that that's the truth. Do not insult my intelligence by telling me otherwise. If you believe at all in principle, with the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or if you even believe in law at all, then you cannot and must not change this policy.
Hi, I'm Shay. I am a second year at IU Indy, and I'm trans. reflects what I look like and how I identify. I don't really think that we're asking for a lot. I think it's just a basic human dignity to have an ID that reflects accurately. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out today.
Trey Graves.
I've come here today to speak because I hope that reason and decency matters to the decision makers. I only have time to point out a few flaws in limited detail regarding the regulatory analysis of this proposed rule change. Number one, the description of parole is flawed. In Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles v. Simmons, the court affirms that the BMV asserts its binary-only policy for state credentials is designed to accurately, consistently, and efficiently identify licensees. The agency indicates that recording an individual's objective characteristic of sex better advances the state interest in accurate identification, end quote. Yet the proposed justification for the rule change cites that the BMV offers a credential that does not reflect the gender of the applicant. This is patently false. When a person dressed in binary male shoes and clothing, facial hair, and a deep voice may sometimes be classified as female, the BMV is enabling inaccuracy, inconsistency, and inefficiency. It is not accurate that a male walking down the street would provide a license with a credential reading female. It is inconsistent that these quote-unquote objective male characteristics are labeled male or female according to the BMV. It is inefficient if that license is presented to a cop, a workplace, or a security checkpoint, because now the BMV issued license looks fake. This individual may now be denied access that any other male would have. Number two, the fiscal impact analysis is incomplete. When the BMV seeks to enact inaccuracy, inconsistency, and inefficiency into Hoosiers' lives and state agencies or local government, Hoosiers will leave and fewer people will become Hoosiers. Collection of BMV fees will decrease and tax revenue will decrease. Number three, that impacted parties is noted as none should be an embarrassing error. This impacts Hoosiers, constituents, when a Hoosier with a female credential has facial hair and walks.
Sarah Garrison.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Garrison. I'm from Montgomery County. I'm a voter. I'm a mom. I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I happen to be the mom of a changed child, and I'm here to speak out against this bill. This one that would take the rights away from transgender people to change the gender marker on their government-issued IDs. This bill is not just policy. It's personal. It's dangerous. It's debating lives. It's not debating just reform. It's debating, in some instances, my child's right to exist. When my child has an accurate ID, they can go to the doctor, as we've all heard today. They can go to the doctor, get a job, hold over, or just simply exist in public without fear of being persecuted. When that ID doesn't match my child's identity, they are vulnerable to being outed. They are vulnerable to judgment, discrimination, harassment, or worse. I've worked in medicine, and I've seen how dangerous this mismatch can be. I've seen people turned away or mistreated when the documents don't match who they are. This bill does not protect anybody. It puts people in harm's way. It tells trans users that you don't count. It tells trans users you don't belong and that you don't believe and that you don't deserve to be seen. Governor Braun looked me in the eye in February at a meeting and said, "I don't tolerate bullying." With all due respect, the bullying is being legislated. It's being legislated and it's being signed into state law. The message that it's sending transgender people, and it's sending it loud and clear, is to erase yourself or the state will erase you. Some people call it erasure. I call it eugenics. Let's call it what it is, folks. History tells us that this is how it begins. It began this way in Nazi Germany. It started with IDs. It started with categorizing people. It started by stripping out documentation. It started by erasing people on paper before they erased them in society. You're not just erasing people by taking away a form. You're erasing them by taking away their safety, you're taking away their dignity, and you're taking away their legal right to live honestly in public. This isn't conservative, it's not moral, it's wrong. Harvey Milk said, "It takes no compromise to give people their rights. It takes no money to respect individuals." And this vote, it will cost the legislatures nothing but courage. But to those of us who are allies, trans and everything else, it means everything. Our officials were not elected to target the vulnerable. You were targeted to serve all Hoosiers. So serve us and vote no. Don't erase my child. Don't erase any of us. History is watching. Thank you.
Excuse me if my voice is a little shaky. I haven't done this before. Everybody else has said a lot of good things for the 2 hours that I've been here, but I wanted to share my point of view. I'm 15 years old, non-binary, and I'm really excited to get my driver's license. I just turned 15 last month, and then I heard about this. I already have an X on my passport, which is still a valid form of identification, so having a different marker on my driver's license would only cause more confusion. This change is clearly just going along with the administration's demonization and hatred towards transgender people. I realized that my gender and sex were not the same when I was 10 years old. This is not a new, trendy decision that I've decided to make. It has been a struggle that I would not wish on anyone else. Waking up every day and knowing there are grown adults who hate people like me is demoralizing. Explaining my gender to the people around me is nerve-wracking and dangerous, especially when I'm talking to people from another time. Having a different gender on my ID would make explaining myself even more complicated and stressful than it already is. I have already been harassed by kids my age for being transgender. I don't want the government to do the same. In the rule, it says that no one will be affected by this, but I will. And I know dozens of other people who will too. To anyone that supports this new transphobic rule, I want you to look me in the eyes and understand that I am the type of person this is harming. I'm a good kid, and I'm being targeted for no reason. I go to church, I get good grades, I play sports, I have friends, play music, I draw, and I paint. I'm more than my gender, but it seems as if that's all anyone cares about. Please reject this proposal.
My name is Indra Mitchell. I've lived in Indiana for most of my life. I grew up in Bedford, I live in Bloomington, I work there, I serve my community there, and I'm here to speak my displeasure today on behalf of my trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and intersex community members. The proposed amendment has potential to put tens of thousands of Hoosiers in danger. It is targeted towards a community of people that already faces an inordinate amount of discrimination and violence on a day-to-day basis in their daily lives, and now on a federal level, and also a state level. I find it abhorrent and absolutely disgusting that the state of Indiana would continue to punch down at this vulnerable, marginalized community. As it's been said before, 40% of respondents to a study completed by transequality.org say that they face discrimination and harassment when presenting documents that are incongruent with their lived experience. I can attest to this. I myself have documents that are incongruent with my lived experience, and every time I hand my ID over to somebody for whatever reason, I have to gauge their reaction. I have to watch their facial expression. I have to make sure that I'm not putting myself in danger for something as routine as buying beer or a traffic stop. This is completely preventable. This chance of violence is completely preventable. It's completely unnecessary. We should not be putting our vulnerable community members in this position. And these amendments don't only affect trans and gender non-conforming individuals. It also inconveniences our cisgender counterparts. If a cisgender man, if by some mistake receives an ID that has an F on it with this proposed bill passing, he'll have to go through all sorts of hoops and jump through all sorts of difficult things to fix what should be a simple problem. It's only an inconvenience for him, whereas for other people it's a matter of life and death. But I wanted to, pop that up there as well. And to the point that this is how it all started in Nazi Germany. And as we see right now with sort of ICE raids everywhere, I don't believe that it's a matter of if, but a matter of when ICE is turned against the trans community. Yep. I believe it will be happening very soon. And I believe that this proposed bill, or this proposed amendment, will only exacerbate this problem. If we have many, many people who have IDs that are incongruent, even with other IDs that they have, if someone has a passport that does not match their driver's license, this can absolutely be used to declare them as maybe not undocumented, but as having incomplete documentation, or as having just something that could absolutely be written off, and will absolutely be able to sort of target these marginalized people. So with the fact that there are no benefits listed financially, bureaucratically, or socially at all for this proposal, I absolutely will call on the BMV to dismiss and reject these blatantly discriminatory amendments.
Right, Klaus. Chris Morgenstern. Oh.
Did you know that the live stream cut off at 11?
Yeah, this was an hour hearing, and so we're going a little bit longer.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Memorized once. Are endowed with certain inalienable rights. Among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, anyway, people have talked about these, and it's not in the Constitution, it's actually the Declaration of Independence. And what it's about is governments are created to preserve the rights of everyone. That's their whole job. It doesn't say anything else. The founding document of our nation says this is what governments are for. And of course, it's also in the Constitution of the state of Indiana, which ironically is something that our governor took an oath to preserve and defend. And in his actual executive order, one of his reasons for doing this is that he took an oath to preserve the Constitution. Now, the only thing this does is take away rights for certain people. It's the opposite of what government is supposed to be doing. And the executive order and the proposed ruling to execute the executive order are both unconstitutional. Governments are to preserve the rights of the people, period. That's all I have to say.
Chris Morgenstern.
Hi, I'm Chris Morgenstern. I'm here as a lifelong Hoosier and an LGBTQ plus advocate and ally and a parent of a trans child. I'm a little ignorant about how this process is. I thought there would be a committee that is making this decision and there's one person sitting here. I think this just illustrates how the state really discounts this population. They don't even bother to have the decision makers here to listen to this community. I apologize to you. If you are the sole decision maker on this, I urge you to keep in mind all the voices you've heard here today and the stories you've heard here today about how this rule change will affect this community. It will affect people who aren't even members of this community. I'm sorry, I'm very emotional because my child has been protected from all the hate and vitriol and has been allowed to grow up like most of us do, in peace and just living as his true self. And now he can't because of all these laws. And he's having to face things he's never had to face in his life. He got to live the way most of you out there should have, and now he can't. I've also been told that
where it happens often enough that there's a name for kids with this condition, huerosis, which means testicles when you're 12. Where a child may seem to be a boy at birth, but develop female traits at adolescence. The Braun rule would force children like these to stick with the gender they appear to be born with, no matter what happens when they mature. Another complication is that your gender identity doesn't just roll out automatically in the womb. A human embryo's genitals become male or female early in pregnancy, during the first few weeks. But the brain doesn't start to become male or female until later.
MJ Wallaker.
Hello, I'm here today to oppose the changes to this rule. So if you look at my state issued ID, there are 4 pieces of false information. First of all, my ID says that I'm 5'3", and I recently learned that I have grown to the wonderful height, the towering height of 5'4". The second piece of false information is my weight is listed at 255 pounds. And I hesitate to say the direction that my weight has gone, but let's just say it's not 255 anymore. The third and fourth pieces of false information on my state issued ID are my name and my gender. I, as a non-binary person, do not have the right in Indiana to have my true gender represented on my state ID. I have felt the ice cold terror from the tip of my head down my spine to my toes the one time I have been pulled over. The police officer cited me as going considerably faster than I had been, and I was issued the standard very large sum of money and a court date. As I drove away, the police officer then proceeded to follow me to my destination. And I was shaking. And when I arrived at my destination, he pulled up alongside my car and motioned for me to roll down the window. And as I did, I said, how can I help you, officer? And he said, when you get in there, do you have a minute to talk? And can you park and we can talk? And I said, okay, sir. And he said, don't worry, this is good for you. And I said, okay, sir. And I entered the parking lot and I pulled over. And as the police officer parked behind my car and approached the window, he asked to see the ticket and I handed it to him. And I am very thankful to say that I am the only one among any of my friends that I know that got off lucky. He said after I drove away that he checked my driving record and that it was spotless, and that he was going to issue me a warning, like he should have done in the first place. His words, not mine. Again, I'm one of the lucky ones. I have donated to countless GoFundMes for so many of my friends who already work multiple jobs just to pay bills from paycheck to paycheck. And while I am extremely thankful, I know so many of my friends who will now have to face this when their gender no longer reflects their identity on their state identification. Alternatively, I have had positive experiences with the police, believe it or not. I work on a college campus, and so I regularly have to interact with law enforcement. There was one time where an officer arrived, and when he asked for my name for the report, I asked him if he needed my the name on my state identification, or if he would like the name that I go by in case they need to contact me to follow up. And he said that we prefer the name that's on your identification, and I said, I just handed him my ID. And he asked me if he wanted me to avoid him calling me by that name. And of course I was trying to lighten the mood, and I said, well, it's the name my mom calls me whenever I go home for Christmas, so thankfully that has changed. Love you, Mom. And what I expected was a laugh. And he went, oh. And I was like, oh, have I made a misstep? And then he asked my pronouns, and I said they, them. And then him and his partner then proceeded through the entire interaction to call me MJ and they, them, and did not once misname or misgender me. And that is the kind of experience that I want everyone in every situation to have whenever they have to interact with law enforcement, whenever they have to interact with anyone. And I recognize the privilege that I had within my role as a university representative in that moment, because it's much less likely that the police are going to be disrespectful to me when I'm in my university issued polo. But this for the first time in my life, have a community and people who love me for who I am and support me for who I am. Since I moved down here 4 years ago from Michigan, and I have not once thought of ever leaving, because I'm surrounded by people who love me, not the gender on my ID, not the gender that I was supposed to be, and I will not be going anywhere. Trans people exist, they have always existed, and we will always exist, and we are not going anywhere. Thank you.
There are 6 people left to sign in. There is another government agency that has been waiting to use this room. I do want to give those 6 people an opportunity to comment on the rule, but I at least wanted everyone to be mindful that there is another event, or I'm not sure what's going on, but there's something else going on in this room. But I do want to give these last 6 people opportunity to comment. Next would be Jenny Lynn Nichols. Corey Hughes.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and for those of you who are here to listen, and for those who are going to listen or read the transcript later. I'm going to speak today more on the emotional side, less on the scientific and legal and political and fiscal side of it. But let me say I am vehemently opposed to the proposed BMV policy change. I'm a Hoosier, I'm a cis woman, I'm a mother of 4 children ranging in age from 12 to 29. Born and raised Hoosier. I have a business degree from Butler, a nursing degree from IU, and a master's in business administration that I got online. I mentioned the 4 kids, right? Really hard to go get a master's when you have 4 kids at home. I'm a registered nurse. I'm an executive at a large medical device company, one that actually is really great with the LGBTQ community. Did I mention I've been a Hoosier my whole life? Most importantly, I'm an ally, and I'm a proud mom of a 23-year-old trans man and a 12-year-old who is truly trying to discover who they are, but knows that she fits somewhere in the LGBTQ community. And that 12-year-old, as she's watched a lot of the policies over the last year happen, has come to me crying a lot of different times about what's going on in our world, and recently has called me from her dad's house and said, "Mom, apparently I don't exist. What's going on? Like, what do I do?" And I've had to talk her off that ledge, and that's a really sad thing to have to do as a parent. And like it's been mentioned in the past, we live a really privileged life. I feel like I've tried to introduce my kids to a lot of different things, and I've raised all of them in a way that we hope everybody gets to be raised, but never in a way that anyone, they've all been raised in a really privileged way. I acknowledge that. But the fact that she had to actually acknowledge that, according to our government, she probably doesn't exist, is a really, really sad and scary situation. what is going on with Hoosier Hospitality? I've lived here my whole life, and that's all I have heard for 47 years is Hoosier Hospitality. My trans son went to the BMV, and even though we are still fighting, we changed the gender marker while we still could. And we have a lot of antidepressants on board, and we don't see a lot of tears very often, but the tears of joy leaving the BMV with the correct gender marker was something that I haven't gotten to see on his face in a really, really, really long time. And when the actual card came in the mail, I would be lying if I said that we didn't have a real cake and a PJ dance party going on at the house. So I think that, you know, we can laugh about it a little bit, but the reality is these are really big moments that shouldn't have to be really big moments. But we have to celebrate them because they're so few and far between right now. I think that the BMV has a great opportunity right now to right the ship in a world that has a lot of wrongs. And while there's so many wrongs, and this is just one right, and it doesn't fix everything, it can start to shift things the right way. And this is a great opportunity to start that. There's been so many times in my trans son's life that I have thought to myself, I am a cis woman and I have been pretty privileged in my life. I've worked really hard to get where I am, but I'm privileged, I acknowledge that. And life is freaking hard. I've raised 4 kids, I've lived paycheck to paycheck, I have robbed Peter to pay Paul. Life is hard. And I'm not fighting the same battles that a lot of you guys are. I'm not fighting the same battle that my trans son is going to fight for the rest of his life. And so when my baby that started out in one of those really cute little pink gown sacks that you put preemie babies in because they're too little for real clothes, when I figured out pretty early on in their life that pink wasn't going to be their color, and they came out to me as gay, and I wasn't surprised, and I was 1,000,000% supportive and on board, but I thought in my head as a mom, I'm scared for you, and I'm sad because life is going to be hard. And then when they came back to me and talked about gender marker changes, and then name change, and then full transition, again, I was terrified as a mom and sad because life is going to be hard forever. And this is an opportunity for the BMV to not make it harder. This is an opportunity for Hoosier Hospitality and to make this a state where we don't look at our family and say, maybe it's time to move. I've lived here for 47 years. I've raised my family here, and I've never said I don't want to be a Hoosier. But when I have to look at my trans son and say, is it safe for you to be here? Is this a safe place? Is this a safe state for us to live? Is this a safe country for us to be in? When we're having those conversations at the dinner table, it makes you wonder. I don't want Hoosier Hospitality and my residency in Indiana to be a question mark. And the BMV can help me not have to have those conversations. And so I will ask the BMV
to keep that in mind. And the other thing is if by the horrible chance that this policy gets approved, I expect policies to be followed where I am seeing scales by those counters so that I can't lie about my weight. You better check my roots because I am not a redhead. And those people who say they don't need glasses, I can tell you for sure there are some people in Carmel who don't know how to do roundabouts and they need some glasses. So there are a lot of other things on those licenses that aren't true. And if it is the real ID that you're making me use at the airport, if that is truly the real ID that you are demanding I have to get through airport security, it better truly represent who I am when I'm standing in front of that TSA agent. And if you do not give me the opportunity for that ID to truly represent the person that is going to be presented in front of that TSA agent, you are not doing the Hoosier population proud. Thank you for the time today. I appreciate it.
Josie Bowman.
Hi, I'm from Bloomington. Drove up here this morning, and I'm non-binary, and a lot of my friends and family are trans, and I oppose this policy change. Yeah, thanks.
Judy Wilson.
Hi, my name is Judy Wilson, and I'm just shy of about 3 years of being a lifelong Hoosier, and I too am here to reject this policy. I think we've all recognized thoroughly, I appreciate everyone's comments, because you have thoroughly shown me that you too do not endorse institutionalized discrimination, and I appreciate you for that. I appreciate all of you and your comments. And the death of Hoosier hospitality also obviously comes along with this. And I'm sorry to say that our gubernatorial administration at this point, they have been so busy with their, I believe, malpractice. I believe that their stewardship of our governance right now, I believe, is misplaced. When they can't focus on programs and they blame it on the previous administration, some of us is what I'm referring to. When they're willing to spend their time executing callousness and inhumanity, rather than looking out for existing programs and how to continue them that support our children, it makes no sense. November 3rd, 2026. Start with our state representatives, please. They're so foolish. And our U.S. Congress people, please. Mark your calendar now. November 3rd.
Keith Taylor.
Hi, as has already been stated, my name is Keith Taylor. I'm 19. I was born here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'll probably not stay here, to be quite honest with you, because everything that's happening. Now, obviously, I'm supposed to build, but after hearing and sitting here for multiple hours, hearing everyone speak, I want to ask a simple question is, we're asking for inaction. We're asking them not to change anything. We want to be able to choose our gender markers. Like, why is this change happening? Who asked for this? Did y'all? Should I ask for this? At all? Why are we not allowing Hoosiers to express themselves clearly and express who they want to be and be who they want to be? Because all it's doing is pushing out people that have lived through their whole lives. I ain't planning to stay here at all because this one type of community is going to lead to others. If it's trans, it will be the Black community next. With ICE moving in, it will be Mexican American families next. Until they knock on your door, what are you going to do? Stand with your people, and please do not, I'll echo this. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Jude Brown.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jude Brown. I live in Indianapolis. I'm a transgender person. I've lived here my whole life. I'm a parent. I live on the Near East Side. I wasn't going to make a comment, of course, but I have been to the BMV to change my gender marker 3 times now. So I feel like it would be a missed opportunity to say that this will affect people. Especially when we were reminded that this is supposed to be an hour hearing and it's gone over. I was reminded all the time that I have spent in the BMV, at doctor's offices, getting documentation signed, waiting on doctor's appointments, waiting for doctors to give me documentation back, and going to the BMV, going to a notary, all of these things, outing myself to strangers, having my privacy violated. Briefly, there's an X on my birth certificate from Illinois now. There was an X on my driver's license briefly. My name on all my documents was correct, so there actually was coherence. Everything was correct. My records were in order, and the rule changes, and this proposed rule change, don't serve that interest at all. And it forced me to now have documents that don't align, and that sucks. I don't want to go to the BMV. I'm not. Government recognition is important for lots of reasons. To me personally, I want my things to be in order. I want to be recognized. And I want other people that are younger than me, people that will be getting their license for the first time, to be able to be recognized. So this is a disaster. For privacy, just ethically, morally, just in terms of policy writing. In conclusion, and maybe we'll all get a laugh out of this, there's some publicly available information I would like to read. With everything that's been said so far up to this point, this is the About Me section for the LinkedIn page for Kevin Colbus, the Deputy General Counsel for the BMV. With over a decade of legal expertise advocating for the rights of individuals and organizations, my core competencies lie in legal research and analysis, litigation, contract negotiation, administrative rulemaking, and data privacy. At the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles, my mission is to uphold the integrity of legal processes, contribute to our team's success, and support the agency's commitment to public service. My passion for justice and dedication to the community drives my work, ensuring that every decision and action aligns with our collective values and goals. Currently, I manage legal aspects of all BMV contracts and agreements totaling nearly $300 million, a testament to my proficiency in high-stakes negotiation and risk management. I also lead the agency's administrative rulemaking process, engaging with the public and providing guidance to other state agencies. My roles in serving on the Data Governance Committee and reviewing all public record requests emphasizes my commitment to protect personal information, embodying my expertise in data privacy law, and my role as a steward of public trust. It's one of the funnier things I've read recently, and also this is an attack on trans people. This is a part of a really deranged agenda by political extremists to harm the trans people of Indiana. It's also part of a campaign generally to delegitimize our public institutions and to undermine bureaucracies that serve people. So almost everything stated in the regulatory analysis and the rule changes are completely counterproductive. And I will be going to the BMV again, and I will have an X on my license at some point in the future, and so will anyone else who wants it. Maybe not while Kevin Colbus is in charge, Mike Braun is in office, but that will be the case one day. Just finally, being trans is a desirable state of being. It's not a disaster or an affliction or a curse or anything. it is something people can and should want to be. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the people that were on the attendance sheet. Is there anyone else whose name I did not call who wanted to comment? Okay, so then that will conclude today's public hearing. We did have, we fixed the live stream so that most of the hearing was live stream. However, again, there was a time limit on hearing that I couldn't control. Anyone who is present today or anyone who wants to continue to comment on this rule, make comments by email legal at bmv.in by midnight tonight, July 22nd, 2025. The time is now 11:42 a.m. The hearing on LSA number 25-3